My body shook and I was crying. I had tears just streaming down my face. I was sweating, but I couldn't move. And I just heard that voice over and over and over. You will not move. You must not move. This is what you came for. And I knew to respect it. You're listening to the Awaken Broadcast with Cecilia Angel, a space for embodied awakening, honest human conversation, and a living, breathing connection to God's source. This is your invitation to awaken. Hello and welcome back to the Awaken Broadcast. I am your host, Cecilia Angel. And last time I set the foundations of my story, of how it all started, the catalyst moment of me on my knees at 19. And today I'm going to share the next big catalyst moment. If you have not yet listened to part 1 of my story, this is part 2 of my story. So you'll want to go back to part 1, the episode previous to this one, so that you can receive the foundations. However, if you are just entering into my story through this episode, you are in for a treat. The story I'm going to share with you today is when everything changed irrevocably for me. So in the last episode, I talked about my welcoming into yoga, spirituality, my moment when I got on my knees and asked God for help, even though I didn't believe, and how that started to trigger big shifts in my life. The years that followed that moment were really beautiful because I was really starting to get a feel for what was possible for me. I was seeing the expansive potentials for this life. However, as I shared, I was still having difficulty with my mental health. So behind closed doors, I was still having panic attacks almost every single day. I was feeling really sad. I was struggling with OCD, and I was always experiencing an underlying sense of overwhelm and disconnection. And I left off my last story saying that I entered into this relationship with this man. And look, I had said that I was going to be alone for 5 years. So I resisted. I resisted leaning into this relationship. However, it landed down and it was fast and it was quick. Rather than waiting the 5 years that I had said, I actually ended up going into a relationship with this man. We ended up being in relationship for 7 years, and he will kind of pop up here and there because he was really central to my experience at this time. So from that moment of being on my knees at 19, I was really starting to make shifts. I went to school to become a nutritionist. I started my practice as a registered holistic nutritionist. I was really devoted to my yoga practice. I was curious about spirituality. Now, I still didn't fully believe in God. That wasn't something that was central to my life at all. I remember there was this one day that I was going for a walk with a friend, and she had asked, "Do I believe in a higher power? What is my spiritual connection?" And I told her that I had some intuition that there was something greater at play, but I didn't know what to call it. And I didn't really have a direct relationship with that. And so, although I had gotten down on my knees at 19 and asked God for support and received it, I still wasn't fully leaning into that. That wasn't something that was central to me. It wasn't something that I fully believed in. And so from the outside looking in, my life looked pretty good. I had the relationship. I was in love. I had a good job. I was active in my yoga community. I was practicing acro yoga and having a lot of fun. I seemed to be getting my health in order, and I was. But like I said, behind closed doors, I was still wrestling with a lot of pain inside of me. And this one day, I think I was about 21 at this point, I ended up going to a week-long acro yoga intensive. And during this acro yoga intensive, I met this woman and we started to follow each other on Instagram. And as I was paying attention to her on Instagram, she started to share about this trip that she took to India. And while she was in India, she did a course called Vipassana. So it's a 10-day silent meditation course. And upon return from her trip to India, she shared about her experience with Vipassana meditation, and she shared that it changed her life forever, irrevocably. And so when I heard her talk about Vipassana, I knew that I needed to go and do this. Now, I was terrified. I was really scared to spend 10 days alone in silence with myself. That intimidated me at the time. And so it actually took me about 2 years before I actually ended up signing up for my first Vipassana course. Prior to me finally applying to this course that would end up changing my life forever and irrevocably. My partner at the time, because he was living with me, had started to reflect to me that there was something wrong with what was happening for me. He was starting to see the patterns and behaviors that I was acting from behind the scenes, and he was calling me out. And he was even saying that if I didn't make a change, he wasn't sure if he would be able to proceed in our relationship. So I was feeling a lot of pressure from that relationship to change. I would say that initially, when I started doing deeper healing work, I was doing it to save my relationship. So when I first applied to Vipassana, it was because I felt like there was something in me that needed to be fixed, and I needed to save what was basically like a marriage. We were very in love with each other. I was still struggling with low self-esteem. I still didn't feel like I was enough, and every single day in my relationship, I was being reminded of that fact. I was being told that I was acting crazy and that I was not well. And in many ways, this was true. I was always getting overwhelmed. I was panicking every day. I was suffering from OCD. And even though I was taking action to make myself better, to get myself better, I was eating clean, I was exercising, I was going to yoga, I was checking all of the boxes of what should have gotten me to a good place. And this was actually really confusing for me because based on what everyone said, I was doing all the right things. So why did I not yet feel good? Why was I still hurting inside if I was taking such good care of myself? And so finally, I took the leap and I applied for my first 10-day silent meditation course, which would occur in January 2016. Now, on a surface level, I didn't have super high expectations of this course. On a surface level, I wanted to take a meditation course so that I could learn how to meditate. I had been really devoted to my yoga practice, and in my yoga practice, I was being brought into meditative states, and I was also hearing the word meditation quite often. And so it felt like the obvious next step for me to learn how to properly meditate. And so to apply to a meditation course just made sense. However, on a deeper soul level, I knew that this was a very important moment in my life. I was talking to a friend right before I left for the course. It was about a week before the course. And I looked at her nervous and said, I might not be the same person after this. And she laughed and she said, of course you're not going to be the same after this. You're about to meditate for 10 and a half hours a day for 10 days straight in silence. And I remember laughing and saying, oh my God, you might be right. So the day finally comes. I make my trip to the Vipassana Center. I show up, I get everything all settled, and we start the course. So let me just break down what exactly happens during a Vipassana meditation course. You arrive at the center, there's orientation, they break down what you're about to do. Now, one of the rules with Vipassana is that once you start the course, you have to stay for 10 days. You are asked to commit. Do not even apply if you don't feel you can commit to sitting in meditation for 10 days straight. Upon entering the course, you agree to some foundational precepts. You're not going to lie. You're not going to steal. You're not going to harm another or kill another, which is easy enough because you're at a meditation center. And so it's very easy to follow these precepts. And you are going to take a vow of silence that once the course begins, you will not speak until the vow of silence breaks on the 10th day. So although you're in the center with a lot of other people, you are not actually engaging with anyone. In fact, you are not to make eye contact. You're not to talk. You're not to even acknowledge somebody's presence when you're at the center. So the intention is that it feels as though you are alone while doing these 10 days of meditation. So for the first 3 days, we practice a method of meditation called Anapana meditation. This is where we're just focusing on the sensations of the upper lip and the inner nostrils. So this is a very subtle meditation that helps you to sharpen your awareness. You do not start practicing the method of Vipassana until the 4th day. So the reason behind Anapana is to help you to sharpen your awareness so that you can be more aware of sensations, because Vipassana meditation is a sensational meditation. You are observing and simply observing, not changing, not fixing, not trying trying to make different, not pushing away any sensation that you experience in your body. You are just witnessing the sensations inside of your body and scanning up and down very slowly, very meticulously. So for the first 3 days, you sharpen your awareness. You prepare yourself to be able to stay focused for the rest of your time there, focused on the sensations in your body. Now, on the second or third day, the teacher, Goenka, who you learn from through videos that were recorded in the 90s, Goenka has since passed away. Rest in peace. He is a great teacher and a very wise man. I'm very grateful to him. But on the second or third day, he says something to the tune of, for the next week, you will perform surgery on yourself and you will not use anesthesia, which scared the shit out of me. I remember sitting there and thinking, what did I just sign up for? Why did I decide to do this? I'm going to be performing surgery on myself. I thought I came here to meditate, to experience bliss and relaxation. I thought this would be a relaxing experience, but no. What I was being told was that this was going to be some very, very, very deep, sincere work. Now, I had made the decision that I wasn't going to go anywhere. So I decided, okay, fine. After my initial resistance, I'm going to take this very seriously. I'm going to practice this style of meditation as if I had already spent lifetimes practicing this meditation. I'm going to be sincere and I'm going to see what happens when I dedicate myself to a practice with this level of sincerity. So on the fourth day, the full practice of Vipassana is taught. And when I first started to practice Vipassana, I had such a hard time with it. What you do is you start with your awareness at the top of your head and you scan your awareness very slowly down your body, observing your sensations. I would get to about here and I would have to start again because my mind would wander. And so I was having a very hard time staying focused, scanning all the way down my body. And I was getting very frustrated because in doing so, I was starting to realize just how unfocused my mind was. It didn't take much for my mind to get swept away into thoughts, into stories, into what I would do after. It was truly recognizing that no wonder I felt so dysregulated all the time. My mind was a chaotic plays. And it started to make a lot of sense to me. However, I was incredibly frustrated because all day long I was trying to do this style of meditation and just could not get it. However, at the end of the day, there is about an hour and 15-minute long discourse where the teacher, Goenka, talks about the practice, goes a little bit more in depth about the philosophy around the practice, what we can expect, what we're probably experiencing, and he breaks it down and something clicked for me. After we're done with the discourse, he then guides another 45 minutes or so of meditation, and in that final stretch, something clicked for me. And I went to bed that night so excited, so excited to get up the next morning and meditate because I finally understood what it was I was trying to do. Every single time I've done a course, after that discourse, there's always something new that clicks. The evening of the fourth day, I really feel myself lock in. The next morning, I wake up bright and early, 4 a.m., and I am waiting outside the meditation hall by 4:20. You can't enter until 4:30, but I'm already sitting outside. I'm already meditating. I'm excited because now that I understood how to do the practice, all I wanted to do was practice. All I wanted to do was work. And so finally, they let me inside the hall. I sit down and I immediately go into my practice and I begin to do my body scans. Within 10 minutes, of starting. And I always like to say how excited and ecstatic I was that morning because of the very quick 180 that ends up happening here. Within 10 minutes, as if somebody had flipped a switch, I went from, wow, I'm so excited to be meditating, to having the most intense panic attack I have ever had in my life. And my immediate response was to get up and run away because that's what I would do every time I would start to panic. I had a system to keep myself under control, to keep myself suppressed. Every time that I felt that energy start to come up, whoa, I would get it back in. And immediately when I felt that, I felt all the thoughts start to race. Oh, shoot. Oh, God, I gotta. However, simultaneously, when I felt that switch flip, I heard for the very first time in my life, I heard a voice a voice that commanded me, a voice that felt so much bigger than I was. And it said, "Today we sit with your anxiety." And so even though I was having the experience of, oh my God, I need to get up, I need to go into my room and I need to figure myself out and then I'll just come back and it'll be fine. The voice came in and it said, "No, today we sit with your anxiety." And I knew that I wasn't going anywhere. Now, 3 times a day, there is an hour-long period where everyone is required to sit in the hall. Other times, you're allowed to sit in your room or in the hall. It's up to you. But for these 3-hour-long sits, we all sit together in the hall, and our intention is to try not to move as much as possible. So you wanna practice being as still as you can be in these hour-long practices. And I couldn't stay still for the life of me. In fact, I kept having to get up and use the bathroom more in those sections of meditation than any other time, of course, because I couldn't, for the life of me, remain still. My mind and my body and my energy was so busy. And that was a part of my frustration the day before, is that I was being asked to remain still, but I just couldn't. I couldn't still my mind. I couldn't still my body. However, when this voice came in, I knew immediately, intuitively, that for this practice, I would have to remain still. And I heard it. You will not move. You must not move. This is what you came here for. So that voice started to coach me to be utterly still while experiencing the most intense panic attack I'd ever had. And that was saying something because I had a full-blown anxiety disorder. I was constantly anxious. I was always battling panic attacks. And in this moment, I was being asked to just let it happen and not react, to just stay with it, to stay present, to not change it, to not fix it, to not run away, to just stay still. The first meditation of the morning is 2 hours long. It starts at 4:30, it ends at 6:30. For the entire 2-hour period, I did not move a muscle. My body shook and I was crying. I had tears just streaming down my face. I was sweating, but I couldn't move. And I just heard that voice over and over and over. You will not move. You must not move. This is what you came for. And I knew to respect it. I interrupt this broadcast for a brief announcement. Announcement number 1. As you can see, I am getting better video and audio equipment. So this broadcast is improving with every episode. However, I recorded the first 7 episodes with the same quality camera that you are seeing now. When I first got the call to start the Awaken broadcast, I didn't have proper video and audio equipment. God said, start a podcast, so I just started a podcast. At the time, it was more important that I just started than worrying about the quality of the content. However, now that I am really in the flow with this broadcast, I'm so excited to bring you the best quality, luxury experience every time that you join me here. And even what you're seeing here is still mid-tier. I have visions of the quality of production that I want to bring to you. So thank you so much for your grace. Thank you for being along for the journey as this podcast continues to get better and better and better over time. Especially once I got the intro and outro, which is so dope, right? One of my best friends did that, but it's all professionally done. And now the video up against the intro together is calling me forward to do better, to continue improving. And so in the meantime, if you are here now, you are here at the beginning of the Awaken broadcast journey. Thank you so much for being here at the beginning, because you get to watch this show continue to grow and expand and improve. And I'm really grateful for that. I mean, the video that you're seeing in this episode, I literally recorded it on Zoom. I literally knew nothing about video production. I don't know. I'm figuring this out as I go. Thanks for your grace. Announcement number 2. I was hoping and praying, because I didn't know when this episode would air, but I was hoping that it would air before or during the time that I am running a 30-day live meditation challenge inside the Remembership, which is my high-level monthly membership option. So depending on when you are watching this, if you are watching this the day of release, we are only 10 days into this challenge and it is not too late to get up on this. So every morning we are sitting down and we are meditating together at 8:30 a.m. Central Time. If this doesn't work for your time zone or your schedule, the replay is always loaded within the hour. And every time that we sit down, we envision that we are meditating together. I literally envision thousands of people meditating together with us every time that we sit down to practice. This meditation challenge is called the Vipassana experiment. The reason that I call it an experiment is that we are experimenting with what happens when we meditate together 30 days in a row. We're also experimenting with a slightly different structure than the 10-day course that I'm talking about inside of this episode, because not everybody has the ability to take 10 days off of their life to go meditate in a center like a monk. However, as you will hear through this episode, Vipassana meditation changed my life, and it is a huge component to the work that I am offering today. Through this challenge, I aim to give you an opportunity to experience the magic of this practice in a way that feels more accessible to the average individual. So if you are watching this before March 30th, 2026, you can get inside the membership now to join the challenge. I will link everything down in the show notes. However, if you are watching this after March 30th, 2026, you are in luck, because I am creating this challenge in such a way where I can take all of the content that's being created through the challenge live, and I'm going to repurpose it so that the Vipassana experiment can become a challenge that you can do at any time. So at any time, you can join the Vipassana experiment and meditate along with us. Once the challenge is complete, I'm going to take all of that content, I'm going to repurpose it, and I'm going to put it inside the Threshold Library, which is a collection of low-ticket masterclasses and courses. So if you are wanting to dip your toes into Vipassana meditation and you're hearing about this challenge and it's sparking your curiosity, but you're thinking to yourself, oh, it's too late. No, it's not. Either you can do it inside of the membership, where I go live multiple times a month. We have an ever-growing course library, over 100 plus hours of content inside the course library. I'm offering masterclasses, trainings, teachings, healings, guided embodiment processes in there. And you will find the Vipassana experiment, the full guided process, in the course library. I will make sure to get that uploaded as soon as I can once the challenge is complete. But if you are listening to this before March 30th, 2026, you have an opportunity right now to join us live for this 30-day meditation challenge. I really believe that doing this work together is crucial at a time like this, where the world is experiencing so much uncertainty. Part of the collective intention as we sit in meditation every day for this challenge is to take what we are cultivating, this state of peace, balance, equanimity, and centeredness, this presence and stillness that is being cultivated. Part of our intention during the Vipassana experiment is to take that presence and to pour it out to the collective as a silent meditative prayer. Every time that we sit, we imagine that there are thousands of us that are wrapping the planet in peace. And I don't mean this surface level, oh, we're meditating for peace. No, do not underestimate the power of your own presence, your embodied presence, and the way that that ripples out into the collective. Your embodied peace, your embodied presence, your embodied stillness has the power to make a huge difference in the world. So as we sit together and cultivate this state of being, we are not only doing this for ourselves, we are doing it for the world. And if you would like to get on board, if you would like to join in this movement, the movement of the Vipassana experiment, you can join us inside the membership or go to awakenwithcecilia.com to learn more. I'll leave you the link in the show notes. Okay, back to the show. Now, there was a part of me curious as to what that voice was, but I didn't even have time or space to think about that in this moment. And so while I was sitting there, I started to have what I can now understand as a psychedelic experience, a transcendental experience through meditation of being with the sensations, that overwhelm that was just always in my body. And it was just being revealed to me in that moment. Around 6 a.m., there is a chant that they start to play, I think with the intention to help you to push through to the end of that first part of that meditation. It's a chant in the language of Pali, which is the language of the Buddha. I don't know exactly what it translates into, but when you do look into the translation of it, it's just basically laying out the path of enlightenment. Not 30 seconds before this chant began, and at this time, I had completely lost track of time or space. I had no idea what time it was. I didn't even feel like I was in the hall anymore. I was having a very deep psychedelic experience. So, not 30 seconds before this chant began, suddenly I am transported into a visionary space. And I had never had a vision in my life. This was not something normal for me. It is now something normal for me. But it wasn't at the time. And in my vision, I was standing on a cliff, completely naked. And I was right at the edge of the cliff. And you know, when you're standing on the edge of a cliff and you can feel almost like you might jump off or you might fall. I was standing there. And when I looked over the edge, way down below, probably at least 30 feet below, I could see clouds. So it was a cliff that was very high up and everything was overcast and gray. The only thing I had on was my gumboots. And it was so visceral. Every time I tell this story, I can feel myself there again. I could literally feel the air. I could smell it. I could taste it. It was an incredibly somatically inclusive visionary experience. And I knew that I would have to jump off of this cliff as I stood there. And that terrified me. 30 seconds after this vision manifests, I have no sense of time or space. The chant begins. And as soon as the chant begins, my vision starts to shift, going back and forth between me on the edge of this cliff and all of the things in my life that had caused me fear, that had caused me anxiety, from little minor things to bigger traumas. And as I was going back and forth between these two visionary spaces, and viscerally, I would go into the places that caused me fear. As the chant played around me, all of a sudden, something started to shift. I had been in this panic, in this fear for about an hour and a half now, being coached by this greater power that was guiding me. And as I witnessed vision after vision after vision, something in me changed in such a way of disbelief that I had allowed myself to suffer so deeply for so long over all of these things. So the chant goes, there's about a 5 to 10-second pause. And then there is a closing piece of the chant where the teacher says, Bhavatu Sabha Mangalam, which means may all beings be happy. And he repeats it 3 times. The chant goes, there's a space. And in the space, I hear the voice smiling. What do you have to be afraid of? And without a thought, I felt myself jump off the cliff and I fell and I fell and I fell and I felt it. This was a very visceral experience of falling. You know, when you fall in a dream and you can feel yourself falling? It was very similar to that. And I fell as he repeated these words 3 times. And once he finished, without thought, this was all happening beyond my human comprehension. As soon as it ended, I felt myself hit water and I felt the cold. I felt the water all around my body tangibly through my body. And as soon as I hit the water, just like it had started, it was like a switch had flipped off and the anxiety completely ended. I moved into a completely peaceful state. My whole body collapsed forward. I began to sob on the floor. And I had never cried this hard in my life. It was like I was released in that moment by whatever this power was that had come in for me. I was released. I no longer had to be still. I just surrendered and I cried and I cried and I cried for at least 25 minutes. Now, there is a break between that meditation block and the next one where you must eat breakfast or you're not going to. So you only eat 2 times a day. You eat in the morning, you eat it at 11, and then you don't eat again until the next day. So I finally sat myself up, looked around. There was nobody else in the hall, and I had to pull myself together to get to the breakfast hall. And I was in such a daze. I remember sitting, eating my oatmeal that morning, thinking to myself, what the fuck just happened? What was that? Who was that? Because it was so clear to me that something was communicating with me through that experience. And already after this, I'm not even done telling you the story. It gets better. This story isn't even done yet. Woo! But already, my whole perception of life had started to shift. So for the whole rest of the day, the anxiety would keep coming back in my meditations, not as intensely. To this day, my anxiety has never come back as intensely as it did that day. It truly went from 0 to 100 so fast. It was really intense. That was a very somatically intense experience, especially for someone who had never had such a somatically intense experience prior to this. And by the end of the day, I was actually pretty tired and a little bit concerned. Because the voice had said, "This is what I came here for. I came to work through my anxiety." That made sense to me because it was the thing that caused me the most suffering in my day-to-day life. However, by the end of the day, I was starting to dread the rest of my time at the center, thinking that, well, am I going to be feeling this every single day for the rest of my time? This is going to be very uncomfortable if I'm going to be borderline panicking every time. Now, I can look back today and look at that and say, well, yeah, you're suffering from an anxiety disorder for good reason. The more I tell you my story, the more that will make sense. Of course, you need to sit with your anxiety for as long as you need to sit with it, you know? But me, I was just a baby. I was just a baby then. I had no idea. I had only practiced surface level spirituality at that point. I had been practicing yoga and that was really supportive, but it wasn't like this. It wasn't the same. Wasn't the same as this. It continued on until the next day. And the next morning at 8 a.m., we all gathered in the hall for our first hour-long group sit of the day. And as I was doing my body scans, every time I got to my belly, which is where I was feeling the anxiety, it was all in here. I was sitting there thinking to myself, okay, I just have to be equanimous. I have to stay balanced with this energy. It's what's here. It just is what it is. I don't need to change it. I just need to be with it. And suddenly I hear that voice once again. And it was a presence in my field. And it said, turn it to love. All of a sudden, that energy that was here, I felt it move up, 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 right into the center of my heart. It then collapsed in on itself and then exploded. And when my heart exploded, I experienced the most profound, unconditional love I never felt. In that moment, I loved everything and nothing. It was the kind of love, you know, when you first fall in love with someone and you just have to take these deep breaths to be able to hold it. No surprise I'm crying. But it seemed my quieta. Thank you, God. I'm all for crying on this broadcast, but God, I need to be able to keep it together to finish telling the story. I understood everything in that moment. I understood what people meant by God. I understood what all of the masters had been saying. You know, I've been reading all these spiritual books and I understood. Oh, this is what they're talking about. This is the perennial philosophy. This is the truth. And it wasn't something that I could put into words. It wasn't something that it would take me years. It would take me years to be able to explain what happened in that moment. And even still, I sit here and I'm telling you about that moment and I don't have words because God is not a person or a thing or a place. It's an experience that you have when you come into oneness, when you come back into love. And in that moment, I remembered love. Now, this was a very somatically intense experience. My whole body was electrified. I could feel that love well beyond the span of my arms. It was radiating 360 degrees in all directions, and my whole body was shaking. I was weeping. I was sobbing. I was sobbing with realization and truth. And after that group meditation, we all get called up to the front of the room so that the assistant teacher can check in on our practice. Are we understanding the practice? And I sit down in front of the teacher and she asks me, are you feeling sensations in your body? And I say, eyes wide, clearly just electrified, shaking. I say, I can feel sensations everywhere, everywhere, even beyond my body. Very overwhelmed by the experience. The practice asks you to go between body scans, full body scans, and part by part. So doing the head, the arms, the front of the body, the back of the body. And so she looks at me after I say this and she says, okay, just keep going back and forth between the body scans and part by part. Completely just ignores the fact that I'm clearly having an experience. So this changed the way that I was practicing for the whole rest of the time because that presence was with me the whole rest of the time. And it was giving me so much information. I was having visions of where I was going. I had been, prior to this course, I'd actually started to apply for a degree in nursing because I had been working in hospitals, and I saw that there was a path that would be much more financially sustainable than trying to be a holistic nutritionist, which I had already decided was not actually a career path for me. I loved it for myself. It helped me a lot, but I did not want to make meal plans for people. And so I had decided that I was going to shift and just focus on nursing. At some point during this course, I found my mind going to my application for my nursing course, and this voice comes in again and it says, "You're not going to be a nurse." I was actually pretty annoyed by that because the only thing I had had aspirations to do prior to this was to be a yoga teacher. And I had been obsessed with spirituality and had done this holistic nutrition course. And I said, "What do you mean I'm not going to be a nurse? I need to be able to pay my bills. I need something stable." And the voice comes in and says, "You're not going to be a nurse. Just keep meditating," which honestly infuriated me. But on some level, it also made sense. Okay, I'll just keep meditating. This voice that is now guiding me is telling me to meditate. I respect whatever this voice is, even if I don't fully understand. There was something in me that knew it as God, but I wasn't fully ready to accept it as God because I had never had any kind of mystical experience before. I had no comprehension of what was happening for me. I had no reference point whatsoever. So I finished out the course. I knew that I would never be the same again. I knew that this changed everything. And our silence breaks, and I get my phone back and I go to call my partner. And I was nervous because he was never really that into the spiritual stuff that I was doing, even when I was doing it at a shallow level. But I went from, I kind of believe in God, to, oh, I know there is God in one moment. And I went from, I'm interested in doing yoga and eating clean and going to farmers markets, to I am now 100% devoted to the path of enlightenment. And I will spend every waking moment of the rest of my life devoted to that. So I called him on the phone, sobbing, and he says, "Why are you crying? What's wrong? Are you okay?" And I say, "I had a really big experience here, and I'm not the same, and I'm going to need to tell you about it, and I just need you to try to understand." And immediately in his response, I could feel that he would never understand. Vipassana ruined my relationship because he was not interested in walking the path of enlightenment with me. That wasn't something in the cards for him. It wasn't something he desired, and he had no understanding, especially in the years that followed as this progressed. Because I started to go through a very intense spiritual awakening. This experience of oneness and union with God changed my life and changed my path, changed my perception and my understanding, and it opened me up. It opened up my consciousness irrevocably. So I'll share more of what would transpire in the years to follow. But it's really important to note that as much as this set me on the right path and the path that my soul came here to experience and ultimately brought me into the best version of self that I could ever ask for. I'm so grateful for it. It wasn't easy, and it forced me to have to make decisions that were really challenging and confronting. There would never come a time that he would be on board. So we'll talk about that. I'll share that later on in the story. But it was very heartbreaking. Like I said, when I went to Vipassana because I kept having it reflected to me that there was something wrong with me that needed to be fixed. It was being reflected to me that I was a little bit crazy. I was unbalanced, which was true. And so I went there to fix myself for him. I came out of Vipassana realizing that I wanted to come back into harmony. I wanted to experience that union for me. It wasn't about anyone else anymore. I saw where I could go, the level of peace that I could attain if I stayed steadfast on this path, if I continued to meditate, if I continued to find my center, if I continued to build my relationship with the divine. I saw where I could go. And so my path went from being for somebody else or trying to be something for somebody else, whether it was him or other people, to I am here inside of this body 24/7, 365 days a year for the rest of my life. I best devote myself to making this embodied experience as bearable and manageable as possible to even make it enjoyable. Because I really saw how much, when I was scanning my body, I saw how disconnected I was from myself. I saw the places within my body that I was numb, the places where I wasn't feeling, sensations that I didn't even realize were there. Vipassana revealed so much to me, and I became very devoted. I also needed to understand the experience that I had. I remember one night, a few days after this happened, I went to the teacher to talk afterwards, and I shared that I had had this experience and I was trying to make sense of it, and she totally dismissed what had happened, which on one level now I can understand the dismissal of when someone has a very big mystical experience. It can be very easy to get attached to that experience, and I would even say that I did get quite attached to that experience. But I also feel very strongly now that we must validate those initial mystical experiences. For me, a mystical experience now is very commonplace. But in coming into my spiritual awakening and having that experience, I needed answers. And I wasn't finding them in the Vipassana community. The Vipassana community was inviting me to just not attach to it, which is good. I'm grateful for that. I actually really integrate that now. But as a result of what happened to me in that course, I began to seek and I began to explore. And what it ended up bringing me to is because I started to listen to podcasts, I wanted to understand this psychedelic experience. I'd never done psychedelics prior to this experience because of my anxiety disorder. Psychedelics terrified me. There was no way I was going to do psychedelics. I could barely handle regular everyday life. But after this experience, and after listening to podcasts on meditation, and the more I listened to podcasts on meditation, I started finding podcasts that were drawing the parallels between meditation and psychedelics, the transcendental states that you go into during meditation and the experiences that you have in psychedelics, and how there's actually a lot of parallels between them. And this opened up a curiosity for me. I went from I would never do that to I wonder what would happen if I started to explore psilocybin, if I started to explore psychedelics. And I'm going to save that part of my story for the next section because we are about to enter into my psychedelic era, an era of ceremony and rapid expansion of consciousness. So far we've laid the foundation. I started out my journey having transcendental experiences in my yoga practice. This led me to meditation. Eventually, this led me to Vipassana meditation, where I had my first psychedelic level visionary experience, come to God, union with God, massive life altering spiritual awakening. There was a Cecilia before and a Cecilia after Vipassana meditation, and there was no turning back. There was nothing I could do to change that. I was now dead set. Now that I had that experience, one, I needed to have it again. And two, I needed to unravel because Vipassana showed me all the places inside myself. I had been operating outside of my body prior to that moment my entire life. I was completely dissociated. I had no idea that there was anything happening here until I started practicing Vipassana meditation. And I got really into meditation. I was devoted to my meditation practice. It wasn't even just sitting, in the morning, in the evening. I started to apply meditation to every single moment of my life. Anytime I could be meditating, I'm washing the dishes, I'm sitting on the couch while my partner's playing video games, I'm listening to music, I'm walking on the street, because I wanted to practice that equanimity that I received from Vipassana and weave it into my day-to-day life. I saw that, yes, there's my seated practice and that's helpful, but I wanted to be existing in a meditative state of presence. And it set me on a deep state of devotion and to figure out what it was inside of me that was keeping me from being able to, one, remain in my body, and two, to remain present. What was it that was causing my mind to go into these chaotic places? What was it that was causing me to get overwhelmed? I got very curious. So we'll go into that in the next episode. Thank you for receiving this story. This was a major turning point for me in my journey. I'm so grateful. I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for Vipassana meditation. So I want to give a moment to send out prayers and gratitude to the Buddha and to all Buddhas and the entire Buddhist philosophy, because it really changed my life. Although it didn't end up being the path for me, I still practice Vipassana meditation and my work is heavily informed by Vipassana meditation. In fact, I'm doing a Vipassana meditation challenge inside my membership. I'm not sure when I'm going to put this out, but it's going to be happening in March of 2026. 30-day Vipassana meditation challenge called the Vipassana experiment. That'll be happening inside the room membership. So if you see this before then, join us inside the room membership and you can join us for that 30-day challenge where I will be teaching Vipassana meditation and Anapana meditation. So I still practice this. It's just not the end all be all for my path because so many things happened after this moment for me. I will share all of that in the next episode. Thank you again for being here with me for the Awaken broadcast. I am so grateful and I'm having so much fun. Honestly, it's a little bit nerve-wracking and vulnerable to share my story, but I'm also really grateful to be sharing it. And I hope that this story serves you and that it continues to serve you the deeper and deeper we go. So this was in 2016. It's now been a decade since that happened. A lot has happened in the last decade. We'll go a little deeper next time. All right. I'm sending you so much love. I am so grateful to have you here with me. I look forward to seeing you next time. Enjoy the rest of your day. See you then. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for the Awaken broadcast. If this episode resonated with you, supported you, or awakened something within you, I'd love for you to subscribe or follow the show. Leave a review, share it with a friend, or drop a comment wherever you're listening or watching. It genuinely helps this work reach the people it's meant for, and I'm very grateful for that. If you want to go deeper, you can find me on Instagram at Awaken with Cecilia, Cecilia, or explore everything I offer at awakenwithcecilia.com. I've linked it all for you in the show notes, masterclasses, my monthly membership, and other ways to dive in. Thanks again for being here. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next broadcast. Until then, I'm sending you so much love.